Good morning. Welcome to Tecman Talks Dynamics. Today I'm here with, I was going to say just Liz Delaney, but I won't say just, the one and only Liz Delaney, my colleague. I think Matt's on holiday and Liam's sorting his kitchen out because he's been mad enough to fit a kitchen while his wife's away.
Yeah,
which,
so they're leaving us loose today.
Yes.
We can talk about whatever we like today.
Dangerous ground. And we're going to talk about kind of updates to Business Central, managed services. We've got a big update coming in BC23. We talked about some of the features in that and that there was actually quite a lot of technical changes. So Liz, you run the managed service for Tecman and have done that right from when it was first established, kind of when SaaS first came along. I think we've evolved that. I just want to go what managed service kind of, because managed service is a funny term, isn't it? It can mean lots of things to lots of different people. So what do you actually do as part of that service? We call it
cloud cover as well. So
yes.
we kind of branded it ourselves. So I think when we talked about moving customers to the cloud, we talked about automatic updates very easily. You just come into work the next day and it's been updated.
The utopian dream.
Yeah, and I think maybe when we've discussed this with customers in the past, and I'm talking kind of three years ago when this was all came about. I think we all had this dream that that's the way it was going to work, but of course you then factor in the sheer number of changes that Microsoft are making. And that's new features, but that's also deprecation of old features, that deprecation of old fields, some of which might not have been used for years, but were still sat there and in some cases still had data in them or were used for other purposes.
Yeah, the fact that Microsoft's marked them as deprecated doesn't mean the client actually means that stops using them. They don't really, because you can't see that in the client.
And then there's the sheer volume of change that the users can see, but then there's also all the technical changes underneath that are going on, and we'll touch on some of those that are coming in the new version. But the sheer pace of that, I think, is more than we expected. And then, of course, on top of that, for most of our customers, they have a significant level of their own customization, which may be dependent on fields that are becoming deprecated, may be dependent on functionality that is being deprecated, may be replaced by standard functionality. So it might be that something that they've had to have customized 2 years ago is being replaced in this release by standard.
Or there's a better way of doing it.
Or a kind of a forward replacement, or we've got to adapt to that change. So I think the reason that we came up with the idea of the managed service was so that the customer could have this ease of upgrade, ease of update without spikes in cost and all of a sudden being landed with a quote for a couple of £1,000 because there's a change in an update, and just have a regular, relatively low monthly payment which allows us to
that you can budget for,
that allows us to monitor any changes required, so keep a track of any changes that are required because we get pre-notification where things are going to fail. It allows us to, because we're doing this for many customers, it means that the customer doesn't have to bear the cost individually for something that has to be done for multiple customers. It allows us to make sure that by the time we create them a sandbox, they've got a workable sandbox that they can just go ahead and test. And it means that we can factor in all the changes to the standard functionality and work with customers to push that out. So that's the technical side of it.
And the thing you haven't mentioned in that, which I think is tremendously important, is that we have very few to almost none customers that use standard Business Central without any ISVs. And where you've got an implementation where you've got usually 3 or 4 ISVs, and not unusual to get into double figures sometimes these days. You've got to get the update from Microsoft to understand what that is. You've got to get the update from the ISV, which may be dependent on the update from Microsoft, and then you may have a customization on the top of that is dependent on the ISV that's dependent on Microsoft. So understanding the kind of the chains between dependencies and what requires what, I think is getting more and more complex. and you're doing this every 28 to 31 days, that's the point. I think it's hard for a client who is not doing this day in, day out to have confidence that they're on top of it, and they would spend a substantial amount of their time just reading through to see if there is anything they need to know this month. Yeah. We can read through it once, go, right, this applies to all of these, bang.
Yeah. And then of course if you're updating, if you're not on if you're not on the managed service and your sandbox update fails, or you get a pre-notification that something needs to be fixed before you can upgrade, then that would be a case of putting a change request in to our customer services team. They would then quote you for it. You probably have no choice but to accept that quote, and then it goes into our development queue to be developed. It has to be tested and rolled out. So there's a time that will take more time, and will probably cost more. We had one customer that chose not to take the managed service. Now they do have it. One update cost them more than the whole year of managed services, because we were having to do it on a purely individual basis in a reactive way, rather than being able to manage the solution through the course of the update cycle.
I see the bill for Tecman. Not bleeding hearts here, but I see the bill for the what we call pipelines. So where we run those tests in advance of the updates coming through, the infrastructure that we use, it's on Azure, it's part of the DevOps process, to take those updates and run, deploy what you have into those, into kind of almost a type of sandbox, and then deploy the extensions and check that they compile and do and run any automated tests that you have against those. The number that we're running on those now is in tens of thousands on a weekly basis. But that's great, because what happens is like 4 or 5 of those are popping out as exceptions saying this is a problem, and that gives us the heads up flag to be able to start that potentially 60, 90 days. It's not usually 60, 90 days, but 30 days ahead of the update actually getting released.
In reality, in Microsoft had a 30-day update window. Yeah. That was increased during COVID to 60 days, and was supposed to go back to 30 days with this release. They're not. They have given into pressure, I think, from partners, and stuck with the 60 days.
Yeah.
So at the moment, you've got a 60-day window, but we've got 3 months effectively because we can run it early. We are pushing the updates back to as late as we can. So we're doing the sandbox early and pushing the updates back late. That's just because with experience we're learning that issues are coming out of some of these updates. So by managing them that way, we can make sure that people don't experience those issues and maybe they jump straight to the 0.1 release. Or going very quick, and we can kind of keep an eye on those, and rather than someone having to manage it themselves and go on multiple forums and sites and things to see what any issues are, we will manage that, and we will push back, and we will if we can't, if we shouldn't update, then we've got the ability to log cases with Microsoft and potentially get extensions and things like that if there are issues. And I don't want to sit here and say there never are.
But that happens, but the client is relatively protected from that.
Yes.
They just get told, we're not doing an update because we've found an issue that's going to cause you a serious problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all the level they need to know, but whereas they would hit the problem.
Managed service, you may never know that, because we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know if you're not in a managed service and you just schedule your update to run today. So let's for argument's sake, say BC23 is released on the 1st of October. You haven't scheduled an update, so it will just happen whenever.
Yeah, Microsoft tend to do it. They tend to do it by region, my option. Yeah. So the poor old Australians get it first, because I think they're really on the clock, and Australia gets it, and then typically the update the rollout gets suspended because some poor Australian company has found a problem. Sorry, Australia, if anybody there is listening. And I'm surmising, I should say. I think this is what I've observed rather than definitely know. But then, it's a question of Microsoft will sort that out and resolve the issue, and then they'll turn the updates on again. And they'll turn that on very quickly. So almost kind of, 6 o'clock one evening, you'll get the notification, and the following morning your update's done. And it's kind of like, wow.
And if that process is not being managed and it's not being run through a test environment, and it just happens to production, and you go in the next morning and there are serious problems with your system, whether that's a bug that's been introduced and that has happened, whether that's some customization that's key to your business isn't
they
working.
might have fixed whatever the problem was in Australia, but that might cause another problem in wherever because...
And then you log that with our support desk, that unfortunately is going to go into a queue, probably with any other customers that have been updated at the same time that will have the same problem.
Well, this is where I think that one of the other cute things that you've started to do, which is make sure that not all clients get updated on the same day.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, when, the day after that update, the support desk is absolutely deluged because perfectly legitimately people are saying, how does this now work? And want some help with that.
And sometimes it's a really simple thing. So if I just give an example, there was an issue a few releases ago where a permission set needed to be added.
Yes.
Now, it's a really straightforward fix. And if you're on the managed your service, you'd have had it was all communicated. But actually, it meant that people came in at let's say 6 o'clock in the morning, and nobody could work because nobody could log in. It was a quick fix at 9 or 8 o'clock when you could speak to our support desk. But in that, that is avoidable. And it's your managed services, your insurance policy to make sure that that goes through smoothly.
And this is a catch-22, isn't it? Because if your partner is a small partner and has 1 or 2 clients on Business Central, they're probably not going to know about the permissions issue, and that needed to add, and they're going to have to then hit the issue and then have to go and find out. If you go to a bigger partner that's got, like ourselves, hundreds of SaaS tenants out there, then that partner is more likely to have come across that problem, know what it is and know what the fix is, but they've got hundreds of customers. So getting around the hundreds of customers. So, this is where I think the bigger partners that I know of, and certainly ourselves, have invested in kind of automation. And there are 2 types of that. So there's, we're using APIs. There's the automation API and the admin API that allow us to both check what's happening in each tenant on a very regular basis, at least daily, see what extensions have been installed, what types are in there, and so on, and manage that at scale. So, when you talk about managed service, you're not necessarily talking about going into each tenant and having a look at that tenant and checking where that's at. No. Because when you're talking about hundreds, you
not
can't
necessarily.
Do that reliably.
We get an overview of that. We can see all of that, and we can monitor that. We can access the centre if we need to, and certainly if we'd come across a significant issue and had to do a piece of development as part of the managed service, we would be going into the tenant and doing some manual testing as well on top of everything else. But if it's a fairly in terms of updating things like the ISVs, like you mentioned before, we can see what's updated, what hasn't,
what version they're on, what versions are available.
I think there are odd occasions. We have a lot of people who've transferred from previous partners. As part of the onboarding process, we look at what's in their solution, but there may be occasions where there is either a ISV product in that we have never supported before, and maybe we can't get hold of an update, in which case we talk that through with the customer and decide on the best course of action. So that can happen. Also, sometimes if you've got customizations from previous partners and we haven't got access, or the clients themselves, and we haven't got access to source code, we obviously can't. We'd have to get in touch to try and fix that. But that's kind of thing we try and pick up in the onboarding process of the managed service, so that we either put it right there and then we get hold of the source code, or we do whatever we need to do to sort it out. But it's if you've got customization, it's because it's a key part of your business process. So if you don't really need it, it shouldn't be there in the first place anyway.
Right,
So it's and you know, nobody when they write those customizations can see into the future and see what might change in the standard product sitting underneath that customization. I think people who had development in very early versions may not have had best practice followed when it comes to the way
it was best practice
extensions.
It was best practice at the time.
Yeah, we
know. Best practice evolves.
More and more. Yeah,
there's as much change on the development side as there is on the application side.
Which brings me to that there's a significant change coming in BC 23, which a user won't see. A user would never know the difference. But essentially, rather than holding data in lots of separate tables where you've got customization.
So at the moment, just to explain for this to people who didn't hear our update podcast, at the moment, if you install an extension, it has something called a table extension. So you're adding fields to the item or the customer or wherever. Each extension gets its own table at the SQL level. Now, Microsoft has, there's been a long-standing saga about performance issues. That when you get too many of those, when you get above 5 to 8 starts to get serious impact on performance on that. What they're doing is now consolidating all of those additional table extensions into one table at the SQL level, which will, and already I've seen some Italian guy called Stefano put some stuff on LinkedIn yesterday, I think it was, that I saw, which showed the performance difference that impact that has, particularly when you get into the bigger, more complicated systems.
Which is brilliant, and no one's arguing that it isn't.
But it's going to take a transformation from where it was in BC 22, the current SaaS platform, to BC 23.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's two parts of it as well that we're considering at the moment, and that is the how it gets from one to the other. And that kind of update process,
and how much time,
but
that
also
takes.
the time, especially with some of our larger databases, more customization,
running 24/7 with online portals and all the rest of it,
all that kind of thing. So that's
because most updates to date have been so fast that the client hasn't really noticed. Your release is going through, and the update's probably taking 10-20 seconds to. So it's not within a kind of timeout period for a call to an API. Perhaps the system's set up and it's just having to retry a couple of times. But when it's back and doesn't really understand that it's been updated at all. Now, if you're moving large amounts of data like that, you might be down for minutes, not seconds. And there's nothing Microsoft can. There's no miracle cure for that.
No, it's got to move.
You've got to move from multiple tables into one table. The transformation of that, they're saying it's going to, they've done some tests and it's going to be fast.
So we're on to that.
Skeptical.
We're on to it. We'll run some tests ourselves. We'll start to look at the impact. We had a little bit of we were a bit concerned yesterday about things like reporting, saying that if you've got a report that's pulling data, but I think if we're on the cloud environment, they should be okay. If you're on-premise, and you're looking at updating to this version, then there's obviously some work around reporting potentially. You've got object reports pointing at these fields. So
if you go direct to SQL, but you're not cloud ready. Well, this is the point. If you followed the recommendations and the best practice rules for the last 3-4 years now, you're going via an OData feed and an OData or an API resolves that. So you don't understand the structure in SQL. You just see one flat table with one customer record with all the additional fields on the end. If you're going direct to the table
so
level,
you're reporting, if you're on the cloud, there should be no issue. Your integrations, your anything like that should not be an issue. So we've kind of you guys don't need to worry about if you're on the cloud. There's some other benefits as well of the managed service. Obviously there's the code base and the customization and making sure that all stays in line with the base version. But also we release training notes, so we'll tell you what's new and how to use it. So there's some really nice stuff around the analysis that probably a lot of customers aren't using yet because it wasn't there when they first implemented. All of our update notes will take you through how to use that. And
it's a good point because, Business Central these days is very similar to Office, where there's an awful lot in Office that I don't know how to use.
Yeah.
And I don't. Some of that stuff was probably useful to me, but I just don't know it's there and don't know it's capable.
Exactly.
So I end up doing it the long way and all the rest of it. You cannot stay on top of all of this stuff.
But
And
with our
Central's the
notes,
same.
they're done so that, for example, if there's a change around the purchase ledger, there's a section for that. You just send it down to the purchase ledger people so they know it's there and they can start to use it.
I saw some posts between two of our customers. One of them saying they'd just gone to BC22 on SaaS, and one of them said that they were using the analysis.
The analyse mode.
Analyse mode.
Yeah.
And another one that was on it was on LinkedIn. And another one said, who is on SaaS, didn't know that it was there. And
we know who you are, and we know you haven't read the release notes.
Yes, Dave.
Don't reference him by name.
It's not your first name. Because you have to actually go into feature management and turn that feature on.
Yeah.
And if who's got in the business day, most businesses don't have a lot of time to just go and play and experiment and so on. So this is where the guidance really helps.
Savers and some really good features that you can use. The other thing the managed service will do is keep an eye on things like database size. Mm-hmm. So at some point, if your database gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you will start to incur additional storage costs. There are ways around that. There is things that you should be doing, but the managed service guys will keep on top of that and keep track of that.
That's the future of one of the things that managed service is about being proactive by watching that. There's a massive amount of telemetry that comes out. So things like this page takes over 5 seconds to open. Well, there's clearly a problem building up there. Yeah. By the time it gets to 10 seconds and you ring up the partner and say, this isn't fast enough, actually it should have been caught earlier. And telemetry will catch that. So those type of problematic things of spotting problems before they become perceived as problems and therefore proactively doing something about it, I think is a really good...
Sandboxes, keeping an eye on things like,
making sure they're regularly updated and all the rest of it.
If you've got like 17 companies in your environment because you keep creating copies to do tests and never deleting them. So, just
counts towards your storage limit, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's it. So it's just about keeping everything neat and in line and following best practice. So that's why, and I think that the managed service is a very, very reasonable cost for most people. It is between 1 to 2 hours of consultancy per month.
Yeah.
So, and getting far more for that than on this service than you would be if you just paid ad hoc. We've priced it because we want people to take it. It is in the customer's benefit, and it's a win-win really because we get the ability.
We don't want to come in and have our day wrecked by it. Suddenly we've got to turn around.
We're ahead of the game.
Yeah. We can plan.
And then the customer doesn't get an update, which all of a sudden creates absolute mayhem within the organisation, and that's the whole service is built around. It's not going to make us millionaires, but it is built around keeping everything ticking over nicely and should be a win-win situation.
Great. Okay, thanks, Liz. Great to hear the explanations and look forward to talking to you again. Thanks all.